Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well this week. Hope you've had a great week. As always, it's an honor to represent you here in Washington and try to work on the breadth of things that we're constantly dealing with here and try to work on the issues that we have back home and to update you a little bit on what we're working on this week. I'm going to do that. First, I got my almost 8-year-old Maverick here with me this week. Anybody you want to say hi to?
Hi, Mom. Hi, Major, and hi, Grandpa, and Mommy, and Nana.
Did somebody have a birthday this week?
Yes.
Who?
Maddie.
Maddie had a birthday. She turned 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You ready to get out of this video?
Yes.
You ready to exit?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for being here with me this week. Always love having my kids with me. Did you want to add something?
Teddy is here.
Yes. Oh, Teddy is here. Teddy is the office dog from across the hall he leaves a lot of hair in the office here, but we still love him, and he's crawling around down here right now as we speak. But he's a good dog, and maybe someday we'll get an office dog for this office here in Washington. We don't have one in here yet. My dog Halo, he's a little bit big and not always as receptive to everybody as an office dog should be. But in that, I want to talk a little bit about what we're working on, which is what's known.
He's always too hairy.
Yes, he's too hairy. Good point. He leaves a lot of hair everywhere too. That's what German Shepherds do. So I want to talk a little bit about the LEAD Act this week. And what the LEAD Act is this is a bipartisan bill. I introduced it this week, and it's designed to help us explore new ways to improve the way things are being done, not just at the West Palm Beach VA, but at any VA medical center across the country. Now, it's not a secret that the Department of Veterans Affairs, it's been plagued by numerous crises over the years. There's a lot of great work that gets done in the VA on a daily basis, incredible doctors, patients that love going there. I get all of my care inside of the Department of Veterans Affairs, so there's a lot of great work that goes on there every day, but there's a lot of crisis that goes on there as well. And that's why I think it's important to take a hard look at the way that VA medical centers are being run and make sure that they're run at the highest possible level and we have the right individuals in there running them. So what my new bill would do, it's very simple. It's called the LEAD VA Act. It requires the VA and the Department of Veterans, the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense, excuse me, to work together on a study that considers the possibility of establishing a program to assign senior military officers as directors of VA medical centers. Now, to elaborate on this a little bit more, why I think this is important and some of the things that would come along with it, I started with this idea to say, listen, what if we could put an 06, a colonel level, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard into the VA to run those VA medical centers? What benefits would come about as a result of that? They could come in with a crusty first sergeant, maybe a sergeant of some of their head shed to come in there and do some of that work. And in that, I think number one, if you did that, you'd have an important climate change within the Department of Veterans Affairs by having active duty military personnel that everybody in the VA has to answer to, similar to Walter Reed Army Medical Center where I recovered after my injury. It's run by the military. You have a lot of civilians and military that work in there, but that's a little bit of what would happen there. Climate change within the VA to make sure that the individuals that are running that VA, they at one point down the road are going to become veterans themselves. They would have a very inherent interest in making sure that the VA is absolutely the most finely run institution that it could be every VA hospital that they're assigned to go in there and run. Now, beyond that, when you look at what goes on with these directors of individual VA hospitals, there are a number of vacancies that exist constantly, or where you might have a situation where there's months that go by before a new director is named or put into place into some of these VA hospitals. When you look at the military and somebody taking over a new command, when our military is looking for somebody to move into a new billet, those slots are sought out months and years in advance where somebody knows where they're going to head to next. So if we had those as billets for military officers, maybe even more specifically military officers that come from the medical corps to go in there and fulfill a slot within the Department of Veterans Affairs, they would be looking forward to that months or years in advance, leaving no overlap. In the military, if you've been in the military, we take that guidon and in a change of command ceremony, the old commander takes that guidon and they hand it over to the new commander, and there's an immediate change of command And that's what we need to see happen in the VA, instead of having these vacancies exist for months or maybe longer than that, maybe even years. One of the other important things that we have done in this is that when you look at the pay scale for directors of the Department of Veterans Affairs, their pay scale is not at the same level as what would be a director of many of our civilian-run hospitals. And that can quite often be an issue in attracting the individuals that we might want to go in there and run those VA hospitals as their directors. But when you're talking about the military has a very specific pay scale that does not change. It's not going to change because they take a different bill like that. It's based on their time in service. It's based upon their rank. It's already set into place. And so this is an option to get the finest individuals that could possibly run anything. These military officers, colonel levels and first sergeants and things like that to get in there and run them without having to change what has to happen with appropriations. And that's one of the other important things that we do on that front. One of the other things that I like about the idea of running this through is when you look at what happens with the career post-military. For these officers that would have that opportunity to go and run a VA hospital, you could certainly see that as a career path forward at the time that they exit the military to go out there and maybe run a civilian hospital, because that's something that they've had in their past. These are all important things that I look at as saying, let's run a pilot program on doing this. I'm sorry, not even a pilot program on doing this. Let's get an authorization to have a conversation about this. Now, why do I say we need an authorization to have a conversation about this? Because when I had this idea to begin with, I went to the Department of Defense and I went to the Department of Veterans Affairs and I said, can y'all come into my office and let's talk about this? Let's have a conversation. Department of Defense said, absolutely, let's have a conversation about if this is feasible, how this would work, what you would have to do for legislation if we could get a trial program on doing that. I received an answer from the Department of Veterans Affairs that said, under no circumstances whatsoever were they interested in having a conversation with me about it, providing anybody to offer me technical information about how that might occur. Anything to support having that happen, they were not interested whatsoever. Now, to me, that's a problem, because one of the things that we have to do is we got to look for ways to flip over the tables, find new creative ways to make these situations better, whether it's in the VA or in other federal agencies, you name it. We got to be creative about the way that we try to fix these things. And the fact that the VA wanted nothing to do with even having a conversation about it tells me that, number one, there's some reasons that they probably don't want to answer to active duty military personnel. And number two, that it's probably important to do a little pushback there and say, no, I'm going to force you to have this conversation. That's why we have to have this piece of legislation that demands that the VA and the Department of Defense actually come together collaboratively to try to work on getting to the next step, which would be a pilot program. I did actually ask for a pilot program already. I was denied that. I said, okay, hey, in our West Palm Beach VA, the director of the West Palm Beach VA is moving on. We can talk about why those reasons might be at another time, but nonetheless, that director is moving on. This would be a great opportunity to have a pilot program. I would love to have that happen in my local VA where I get my care. Can we talk about this again? Like I said, I was denied, no pilot program. They didn't want to have a conversation on it at all. This is what I'm trying to force the hand of as we work on this legislation. So, I'm not going to talk too much more about it on that front, other than to let you know this is one of the important things that we're trying to work on as it relates to the Department of Veterans Affairs, education benefits there, health care there, home loans there, everything that goes on with inside of a VA hospital, all of our VSOs that go there and provide outstanding assistance to all of our veterans there. All of our veterans, the goal whenever we're doing something in the VA is the number one, make the care better for you, our veterans. Make a value add for you, our veterans, while not hurting somebody else. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Make things better in the VA for every one of you that put on a uniform in defense of this country. And I would like to have that conversation about whether getting active duty military personnel that will at one time become veterans themselves, that are still in uniform, that maybe want to put on a star after they've been a colonel or something like that, have that vested interest in seeing those VAs be the finest run institutions of any medical institution anywhere out there. Let's have that conversation about getting them running our VA facilities. And in that, I'll just end it on this. As always, it is an honor to represent you here in Washington. I always wish you all the best. I look forward to seeing you all around back home. Y'all take care.